All right, let's get personal once more. What do you expect will happen after the third plenum? How will it touch your lives?
Well, there is a topic, although I'm not sure it will appear in the third plenum, but I think it's definitely a very key issue that connect lots of people's life. That is the delaying retirement, right? We don't know if there is any like real policies about delaying retirement will be show up in the third plenum. But let's say if there is a delaying retirement policy, we three, born at late 1980s, we will probably retire when we were like 65. But maybe you don't have to because you will make enough money before that, right? You'll be a fireman.
Well, I hope so. But just to give some context to the discussion is, currently China's mandatory retirement age for men is, I think, 60.
Right.
And for women is even lower, 55.
55.
That's pretty low by all standards, pretty low. And we've seen, reforms of retirement age in other countries as well. For example, in France, where President Macron announced the delay of retirement age, which was met with quite some opposition. So this is actually, I think, it has also been hotly discussed on Chinese social media. It's quite a divisive issue. Some people simply don't want to work longer, but economists, intellectuals, people believe that this is something that has to be done. It is one of the more painful reforms. But on the other hand, people are living longer. Many people are quite healthy and energetic after turning 60 years old. Enabling them, because the mandatory retirement in China is like mandatory. You have to retire after 60 years old. It's not that you are given an option. So taking advantage of this very talented, experienced human talents. This is also, I think, within the potential cause for delaying retirement age. And I think this is part of the China's transition of dealing with a new demographic situation because new births are falling. And it is part of the changing social patterns. There is a paradigm shift in terms of economic development and social
Because at the
progress.
end of the day, the current retirement age is simply not sustainable financially, correct?
Yes, I think so. Yes, that's correct. And I think that's the consensus by experts who have really studied the issue.
But have you thought about retiring later, retiring 5 years later? Have you thought about it? What do you feel about it?
Well, if I'm still writing a newsletter at 60, I'll keep writing it until 65.
Yeah, I think it's also about your satisfactory level of your job, right? Some people just love to work, like Zichen. So sometimes
that's not healthy, huh?
well, it's maybe not that sustainable, but you can. Well, at least I can see your passion in it, right? But for some other people, maybe not everybody, are that into their jobs, and it's a common thing, right? But maybe after retirement, they can have the opportunity to seek other interests that they can develop. So it applies. Different people have different situations.
I think
Right.
Past official documents from the Chinese authorities have mentioned adjustment of the retirement age on a appropriate basis. So that language is quite broad and leaves a lot of flexibility. And but this could be on the table, right?
Right. For broader context, the retirement age right now is set according to life expectancy, which is much shorter than now. Since then, China's life expectancy has grown much longer than before.
It's higher than that of the U.S. now.
Right.
Although the U.S. is a deviation from the Western developed countries.
Right. And I think it makes some sense that the retirement age reflect the growing life expectancy because people have more years to live after 60.
Yes, and part of these reforms is not just narrowly economic. It's in China we tend to use the word 经济, which means economy, and 社会, which means society together. So all these changes are not just economical, but also social or societal. Huh?
Yep.
And another sector that I think we didn't touch much in our discussion today is the financial sector. Actually, my first job after graduation is working as an auditor in accounting firms, which is
One of the big four.
well, yeah, it's kind of related to financial sector, right? Though I'm not in that sector, but I still have some friends in that sector. I believe financial reform will also be part of the deepening reform process. We just don't know how far away it will go. But so far from the documents, you can see that I think China is trying to avoid a path that maybe some Western country, for example, the US, has been experienced. We call it like the hollowed
Industry,
right? Hollowed out because of the too much emphasis was on the financial sectors. I read an article by, you just mentioned Yang Liu, right? I think she mentioned that the people who graduated from MIT, their first priority in their career selection is to go to the financial sector rather than to go to Silicon Valley. So
right.
That's something Beijing tries to prevent from happening, right?
Right, or to stop from happening because it's already happening. People from PKU or Tsinghua University, a lot of them, their first choice of career would go into investment or investment banking.
Even though their majors would be, quantum physics and mathematics and computer programming,
right.
But I mean these subjects have a big role in finance these days, huh?
Right, and
I also add that actually the regulation of the financial sector is not saying that China is going to attach less importance to the financial sector, but make it more like regulated. I remember that when I was a student, when we graduated from our university, like many people, like top level students, they would like to select the financial sector because it has high financial returns, right? But in recent years, you can see that there are some cuts in their salaries. And
for example, CICC. Huh?
Yeah, and some experts mentioned that it's not like a punishment to the financial sector, right? It has a very important role. But on the other hand, a cut of the salary is kind of a guidance to let the next generation, when they select their career path, not just only focus on financial sector.
Right.
They are also about they can also select the advanced manufacturing sector or some other technological driven sectors.
I think China basically sees finance as an industry as a tool, as a medium, as a channel for providing funding and allocating basically funding for other industries that are deemed by Beijing and I think by a great many Chinese people as well.
Right. It's the mean that just is the mean for the end. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think after 2008 global financial crisis, the United States also introduced what's the name of the act, Sabans? Sorry, I can't recall the name exactly. Basically, regulating the financial industry much more tightly, and China took a lot of lessons from that act as well.
So that's why China emphasized the new quality productive forces, right? And by the way, our sponsor, the Tsinghua Institute, has released a think tank report on new quality productive forces. So I think you have read that, right? Any takeaway from that report?
Yeah, I think one of the points I think laid out in the summary of the report is that basically, new quality productive forces is compared to old quality productive forces. Traditionally, China was like the factory floor of the world, rolling out shirts and lower end, for example, toys that we just talked about. But these require a lot of input, like labor, like a lot of resources, and they had some detrimental effects on the environment because a lot of them are highly polluting. So that's a phase that China wants to move on from, because we are having basically fewer births, and so the number of new people joining the workforce is not as abundant as before, and also China wants to have higher value-added goods, and also the environmental protection. Not to mention the zero carbon goal that President Xi has laid out, that has taken a much higher priority in China. Huh? That's also mentioned in the Hanwen Xiu, which is a central officials article in Qiushi. Huh?
Yeah. One of the more interesting points that I noticed about new quality productive forces is that in its definition, it is the changes or innovations in the real economy. In other words, it doesn't include the virtual economy or finance. It just seems that the financial sector has been sort of left out of the new quality productive forces that China is actively promoting.
I think General Secretary Xi Jinping talked about the new productive forces, new quality productive forces, if we have to be very literal in the translation, in the symposium in Jinan, where he was answering, I think, a advice or a question from an expert from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Zhang Bing, and he was saying, the new quality development, the new quality productive forces, it shouldn't be limited to, let's say, solely the high technology industries, but all the traditional industries, if they can upgrade through more, innovative and technological investment and advancement, all these old industries can be upgraded, and that could fit into the definition of the new quality productive forces as well.